He is walking in the footsteps of our greatest leader tonight, someone who was a bit of a disruptor himself, and maybe you could say that this not only was the birthplace of Sir Winston Churchill, but was also the birthplace of that special relationship.
There's no doubt about it. We're standing here as the President of the United States is about to fly over our position in the next couple of minutes, I think, flying into Blenheim Palace, where Winston Churchill, of course, was famously born, very much creating this special relationship with Franklin Delano Roosevelt during the Second World War. We've seen that relationship ebb and flow, but again, I remind everybody listening that it's about far more than the relationship between the President and the Prime Minister. It's about trade, national security, and about economics at the fundamental level.
Lots of protesters here in Woodstock today as we watch these pictures of Marine One coming in, and there's another of the Ospreys that you were talking about. I did say, actually, that it was an enormous entourage that comes with the President, 6 different helicopters.
It's often said that when the President leaves the White House, the White House travels with him, quite frankly, and I think we're seeing that in effect today, Fraser.
It's almost like the court of King Henry, isn't it? That actually when he comes in, he really does make a statement with all the kit that comes with him. So there you go. You can see the Osprey and Marine One flying alongside it. I guess he is in the one in the middle, perhaps.
Well, actually, what you're seeing are 2 decoys, obviously for security reasons.
Okay, so you wouldn't know which one he's in.
a massive entourage, as you can rightly say.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about former visits of US presidents, because obviously there have been protests around other visits. I think back to 2003 and George W. Bush, in the teeth of the Iraq War, that was quite a big protest.
You're absolutely right. There were mass protests on the streets of London, and what you've seen is an assiduous effort by this administration to avoid that at all costs. So there's a reason that we're here at Blenheim. It's a secure location. Marine One can land within a secure area without any protests. Same with the ambassador's residence in London, same at Chequers, same when he moves up to Scotland. So what you're seeing here is an attempt to learn from the mistakes of the past, to avoid security issues, and to avoid the protests, which of course Donald Trump really doesn't like at all. These shots are going to look great back in the United States, landing at Blenheim Palace, birthplace of Winston Churchill, with the cabinet and the British Prime Minister lining up waiting to meet him.
Irrespective of what's going on with Brexit and the relationship between him and Theresa May, I think the affinity that he has for the UK is quite genuine. I mean, you can go from here, from Chequers tomorrow, and from Windsor off to Turnberry, his favourite golf course. His mother, of course, is from the Outer Hebrides. So that is a genuine thing, isn't it?
It is, and it's interesting to note just how many American presidents can claim British heritage. Going right back to George Washington, whose ancestral home at Salgrave Manor is only a short distance from here. Whether it be Bill Clinton, who claimed Irish heritage, Jack Kennedy the same, Ronald Reagan, an awful lot of these American presidents have some degree of British heritage, and that of course plays into the special relationship. The idea that they can speak English, they can speak the national language, and they've got an affinity with the country at an intrinsic personal level.
So would it sting someone like him not to get the full red carpet treatment? I know he's getting tea with the Queen tomorrow, and that will be important to him, but does it hurt?
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. I think that when he had the invitation for a full state visit, he would have envisaged the idea of travelling down the Mall with a gold-plated coach with the Queen for tea at Buckingham Palace. The fact that hasn't happened, knowing how thin-skinned Donald Trump is, will certainly be a blow to his prestige and ego, I think.
What do you expect the business leaders who are there tonight are there to do? Because they've been selected, carefully selected. What message are they bringing?
There's no doubt about it that they're going to tap into the idea that the United States is open for business and the United Kingdom is open for business. When you look at the facts involved in this, the United States is worth £100 billion in terms of UK exports. We import £60 billion from the United States. We simply cannot exist without one another in terms of moving into this new era of post-Brexit. Donald Trump wants to make America great again. He needs to do that by selling more overseas and opening up markets. The UK is the obvious place for him to do that. Okay, James, stay with us. Thanks very much for the moment. I should just say that although we are talking about the heritage of a former great British leader, Cathy, don't forget that the current Prime Minister was born and raised not very far from here, down the A44 in Haythrop. Her father was a vicar there, and then she moved to nearby Wheatley, not far from Woodstock behind me. So she has an awful lot of knowledge about this local area, which I'm sure she'll share with the President when they sit for dinner later on this evening.
And there we have it. I think Marine One touching down in, you can see it just above the tree line there. As Christian and James were pointing out, there are the decoys, of course, that always accompany Marine One. We get used to seeing them over Washington. There's always 3 helicopters that travel together. You never quite know which one the President is in. But since that is the one that is now touching down, we assume that is the one that the President and the First Lady are in. there we go. It's coming into land at the moment, and then the president will be taken to the steps there to meet all of those people who are greeting him. I'm just trying to find out actually who's there from the White House, because obviously trade, a very important part of this evening's dinner with business leaders. And as we've been saying, this relationship in terms of trade, very important, not just security, but trade also very important between these two countries. But there's a general recognition here from speaking to people in the White House in Washington that the UK does need this bilateral agreement more than the US does at the moment, and that puts President Trump in a position of strength. He also comes as well having pointed out, as he said, that the UK is somewhat in turmoil politically at the moment, and things are a bit, as he called it, hot in the UK, referring to the resignations of the past week around Brexit. And he's weighed in on the Brexit debate, suggesting that the government's white paper is not what actually the British people voted for. Again, unusual for an American president to weigh in on domestic British affairs, but clearly following it. And that is the backdrop to this touchdown at Blenheim Palace, is a president who has pointed out that the country he's about to visit is in turmoil and suggested that he doesn't approve of the government's new Brexit policy.
Yes, although I suppose they would prefer the interference that he's laying out at the moment rather than the interference of President Obama back 2 years ago when the UK was told firmly it would be right at the back of the queue. At least this US president, he might not agree with the direction of Brexit, but at least he's saying we want to do the trade deal, and that trade deal is open, and that's probably what the focus of the meeting at Chequers is going to be about tomorrow. But as you look at these pictures, Cathy, you're reminded of the great history that actually accompanies Blenheim Palace. It is actually one of the finest palaces in England. It was gifted to the first Duke of Marlborough by Queen Anne some 300 years ago. And the Marlboroughs actually have done remarkably well in keeping the estate intact. It still has that 2,000 acres that goes along with the palace, and lots of visitors go around Blenheim Palace, particularly interested, of course, in the history of Sir Winston Churchill, which, of course, Donald Trump is going to be seeing for himself this evening. So there is the welcoming committee, quite a welcoming committee, and presumably he's going to be driven into the great court of Blenheim Palace, where he will, I don't know, will he inspect the guard? Will he stand on ceremony as they play the songs for him? There is a medley of songs that has been planned, Cathy. So the Scottish, Welsh and Irish guards waiting patiently for the car to arrive.
Ron, what do you think people back home are going to make of these pictures that they're seeing now?
I think people are going to really enjoy seeing these pictures of the President of the United States with all the pomp and circumstance of the guards that you see there. And the President of the United States undoubtedly will walk through those columns, and he will look a much stronger, more presidential leader than we've seen him in Brussels earlier today, and certainly some of the dust-ups he's had with foreign leaders in the past several weeks. So from a White House visual perspective, Cathy, I think this is going to look like a home run for them tomorrow.
I was talking to the Foreign Secretary, the former Foreign Secretary, Jack Straw, a little earlier today, and I was asking whether, if you're Jeremy Hunt, the new Foreign Secretary, you are slightly nervous of a visit like this because he is so unpredictable, James. Do they bake that into the share price when Donald Trump comes along?
Well, I think there's no doubt about it that what we're expecting is the unexpected from Donald Trump. No one can actually forecast what he's going to say at any particular moment. But certainly I think that he'll be full of pleasantries tonight at this rather ornate event. It's fair to say Donald Trump will not have seen anything like this in his life beforehand. There is nothing quite like the spectacle of a visit of this nature. And as Juan was rightly saying, this is going to play in great for Donald Trump's re-election campaign, which, let's not forget ourselves, was actually kick-started on the very first day of his presidency, which is unprecedented.
Of course, this is important, Ron, for the British economy, because this is what Americans are going to be seeing, and this is what they travel for, to see the guards.
No doubt about that, Christian. And this is very, very important for Theresa May, candidly. When we talk about the strength of the president and how this is going to play back home, but Theresa May has been damaged in the last week or so by a lot of different things going on with Brexit. this also puts her on a stronger footing, at least in the short term, of standing with her closest ally.
Ron, will the pictures, if there are pictures tomorrow of the protests that are planned in London, and we do understand that there are mass protests, President Trump will be kept away from them. But of course, you know, in this age, they will be beamed straight back on social media and on television back into the US. How troubling will those be? Even possibly to Mr. Trump's supporters who would still value the relationship with the UK?
To be perfectly honest with you, Katty, I think the never Trumpers, that's 35 to 40% of the electorate who will stick with Donald Trump no matter what. They'll say, this is a strong leader, he's showing them, and they're out there to protest, but Donald Trump is doing exactly what he promised to do. My question here is, how will this play with the independents? The independents are the most important voting bloc in the United States. How will those people look at those pictures, those visuals of people very angry all up and down the mall in London tomorrow and say, is America's image abroad being hurt or is it being weakened by the presence of Donald John Trump here in London?
Right, so if you're a White House communications person at the moment, you are hoping that these are the pictures that people remember from this visit, not the pictures of protests that the president won't be seeing, but which we may see being broadcast tomorrow.
No question. And if you are in the White House communications shop, you want the evening news in the United States to be leading with these pictures tonight, Katty, and you want them on the breakfast shows for all the major networks to be seeing these visuals as we're watching right now.
Yeah, and Christian, they look absolutely stunning. There we have Mr. and Mrs. May walking down through the guard. So we assume that President Trump is just moments away from pulling up. Is he pulling up in the Beast in front of Blenheim Palace? Do you know, Christian?
Well, the Beast is certainly here because we saw it go past us earlier today down the A44. It was brought in 6 hours ahead of the president's visit. So I would imagine, yes, he is being transferred in the Beast. Remember back in Singapore that Kim Jong-un took great interest in this 7-seater limousine. He'd never seen anything quite like it. It's bomb-proof, it's chemical attack-proof, and it's the sort of thing that keeps the president safe wherever he goes. Let's bring in Phil Mackey, who is there at the palace. We're looking at Theresa and Philip May. Philip, and can you see how he's being transferred from the helicopters?
It looks like, as you said, the Beast. It's got its headlights on because the sun is beginning to set now, certainly sinking behind some clouds. It's about a quarter of a mile away down the Grand Drive leading up into the courtyard. So you've seen the pictures there of the Prime Minister and her husband, Philip May. They are now awaiting the arrival. I can see that the limousine itself is still parked. I can't see any movement in the distance there to see whether or not the president is on his way. This is running a little bit late, I think you probably noticed, Katty and Christian. We were expecting this to have happened a good 15 minutes or so ago, which means that all the VIPs, members of the cabinet, the business leaders have had to stand there for about 20 minutes. It's not a cold evening by any means, but nonetheless, they'll probably be getting a little bit fed up of waiting for the president. But we have also seen the American press corps arrive in minibuses a short time ago, just in time to witness this scene, which will look rather spectacular, I think, because it does look absolutely stunning. Looking down that long drive towards where the president's limousine is currently still parked, I'm afraid to say, and beyond that, the statue of the Duke of Marlborough, who built or had Blenheim Palace built for him thanks to a gift from the nation after his success in the Wars of the Spanish Succession just over 300 years ago. Lots of lenses, long lenses pointed in that direction, but still no sign, I'm afraid, of any movement from the limousine. It looks like the Prime Minister and Philip May are going to have to wait a little bit longer.
Yeah, if I'm the number 10's communications shop or the White House's communications shop, I'm giving myself a pat on the back this evening with these images because they are spectacular. The lighting, there you go, the Prime Minister and her husband, Philip May, also colour coordinated with the guardsmen all standing there. It couldn't look more perfect for them, could it, Phil?
It's absolutely stunning, and if you think about it, this isn't an official state visit, so what better place to come than the only non-royal palace, and the only palace not either owned by the monarchy or by the church. So this is the only other palace that could come, but you still get this magnificent Baroque palace, beautiful landmark, well known throughout this country. Absolutely there with the massed bands of the household division standing to attention, ready for the arrival of the president. It's just exactly what Donald Trump wanted. And it's probably as close to a state visit as you could have. In fact, the four trumpeters, the state trumpeters of the Household Cavalry, are only ever deployed for royal, when the royal family is present or when there is a head of state. So again, it's just about state visit, except it's not happening at Windsor Castle, and there isn't even more pomp and circumstance. But I suspect for the American audiences, this is plenty enough.
As we just wait for the car, we should just spell out what's going to happen tomorrow, because the meat of the visit, of course, is tomorrow. So in the morning, they're going to go to a military base to see a joint exercise between US and UK special forces who have worked together before tackling Islamic terrorism. And they're going to be given a show tomorrow when they go to that. And then in the afternoon, they're going for lunch at Chequers, the country residence of the Prime Minister, of course. And while they're there, there's going to be substantial talks, not only about trade, but also about security as well. And presumably that is where they're going to be talking a lot about the trade deal. And I would suspect that there'll be senior members of the cabinet there, maybe even Dominic Raab, who is, of course, the new Brexit secretary, new to the job, but very important in not only what is going on with Europe, but also with the United States. And there you go,
So,
you can
Christian,
see
here we
the
now
beast
have
coming
the
up the
pictures
hill
of a...
to the palace.
You're seeing it too. Yeah, the pictures of the beast coming up the hill. I was just starting to think that they were making the Prime Minister wait a little uncomfortably long before they actually turned up. But here, look at that, the beast roaring over the horizon into the courtyard at Blenheim Palace with the British and the American flags flying, the President inside. If you want a projection of power around the world, there are a few better ways to do it than to turn up in this particular car.
And James, while we're watching this, he's going to see the Queen tomorrow. How many of the presidents has she met? Do you know? I mean, I think there's only one, am I right? LBJ that she didn't
She
meet.
certainly didn't meet Lyndon Johnson, but she has, I think, a remarkable track record going right back to Dwight D. Eisenhower, the Kennedys, the Reagans, the Clintons. She has met American presidents going back throughout her entire reign. There's no doubt about it. Some people are rather apprehensive about this meeting, but the Queen, of course, has a great track record of being able to put up with very, very difficult visitors, not least of which is Donald Trump, of course.
Yeah, so the president just getting out as driver there. These are, of course, the special service personnel who are just going to...
It's important to note, this car cannot be opened from the inside. The car can only be opened from the outside. It cannot be opened from the inside at all. It requires someone to stand outside and actually open the door. So heavy is it, designed to withstand all kinds of assault from the exterior. It is effectively a tank that looks like a car.
Donald Trump coming outside to greet Theresa May, the First Lady Melania Trump coming around the side of the car to greet the Prime Minister and Mr. May as well. Friendly smiles, although it has been perhaps a little bit of a difficult day in terms of what Donald Trump has said about Boris Johnson, about Brexit, about the government's new plan for Brexit. But at the moment, all smiles, and it looks like Philip May is pointing out some of the finer points of Blenheim Palace there. James, how many American presidents have been to Blenheim Palace?
We don't know. Do we know how many presidents? I think he's the first, is he?
It might well be. Certainly, it's a
whether-
remarkable opportunity for Blenheim Palace to show itself off. And I think what's interesting here is you're seeing all the facets of the special relationship on display: the heritage, the history, the trade talks that are going to be going on, the joint military exercise tomorrow that are going to be witnessed by the President and the Prime Minister before the meeting at Chequers. If you want to understand the special relationship, look no further than the itinerary for this meeting and this trip, I think, by the President, which I think encompasses every single element of that relationship, which is going to continue irrespective of who the President or the Prime Minister is at any one given moment.
And there they go, up the red carpet, up the steps into Blenheim Palace. It's quite interesting. There was just a little shot there where he held a hand. We remember the shot of them holding hands at the White House. Let's just listen to the anthems which are about to play. So there you have the ceremonial band of the household division playing for President Trump and Melania, standing there at the top of the steps. What you heard actually was Hands Across the Sea, a special song written by Major Craig Hallett, Director of Music for the Household Cavalry. Then the National Emblem, an American march that was composed in 1902 by Edwin Eugene Bagley. There was the Liberty Fanfare, which was written in 1986 for the centennial of the Statue of Liberty. And then, of course, you'll probably have recognised the last two. That was Dear Lord and Father, mixed with Amazing Grace and featuring the last post and taps. So there they are, about to go into the dinner. And when they go into the dinner, they will be serenaded by the Countess of Wessex String Orchestra. And there will be music throughout the evening. They're going to be served with Scottish salmon, and then there will be roast beef, and for their dessert there will be strawberries and clotted cream ice cream, which sounds very nice indeed in the Oxfordshire countryside and the fine settings of Blenheim Palace.
Christian, I know you always make those international comparisons, and you're a keen observer of President Macron's ability to deliver when it comes to statecraft. I wonder whether he was watching that and thinking, wow, the British just knocked that one out the park.
Do you know, I was just thinking actually back to Bastille Day last year and the President arriving in Invalides, and then of course the great setting of Bastille Day and the parade that goes down the Champs-Élysées, and that is quite a spectacle, but that is something to compare what we've just seen this evening, and vitally important, I think, for Theresa May probably as well. Perhaps the state visit had been extended too early. It was certainly extended for any president too early, but now that it had been sort of downgraded to what they have called a 2-day working visit, it was important at the same time to put on something that honoured the office of the president. Take the personality and the president out of the picture for a minute. What we're recognising here are the strong bonds between two countries, and of course the importance of those bonds and the importance of the office of the President of the United States. And it's probably the household division have done President Trump and Theresa May proud this evening as they go in for their dinner.
Yeah, and I think that's the important point to make, isn't it? That while this president may be causing concerns amongst his European allies and does not particularly have high approval ratings in the UK or around Europe, he is still the president of the United States of America. He commands the biggest economy in the world, he commands the biggest military in the world, and that alone gives him a huge amount of power. And what we have just seen is an honouring of that power and of that position. There will be some people in the United Kingdom watching it saying, why are we giving Donald Trump this kind of respect when we don't agree with his policies? And we will see those protests over the course of the next 24 hours. But right now, this is a tribute to the man who is in the White House, the man who is the president, the 45th president of the United States, and as Christian says, to the special relationship between the United States and the United Kingdom and decades of history, of course, of being allies in the world. And they pulled off an extraordinary display of pomp and circumstance and pageantry and history. And I think the White House and Number 10 will be very pleased with those images that have been broadcast around the world tonight. Phil, what does it look like from where you are?
Looks spectacular, it still does, and I think he will have been delighted that just as the beast drove up into the courtyard, the sun, which had been hidden behind the clouds, peeked out again, giving even more spectacular pictures for the massed ranks of the media. The photographers who are below me seem very happy with the shots they've got. They've all dashed off, as they inevitably always do, to file those pictures, which you'll start seeing on websites very quickly and in newspapers tomorrow. I think, as you were just saying, this is exactly what the president wants, but also it sends a message to the United States and to the president from the UK that we are very interested in doing business. There are trade deals to be struck, and it's not just the cabinet queuing to go in. for dinner tonight, it is business leaders as well. Theresa May wants some good news. She's got her own domestic troubles, but she wants her foreign affairs to be doing rather better. And in fact, as they were posing for the pictures, it looked like a fantastic scene. The Prime Minister, her husband Philip May, the President and First Lady, she in a red dress, the First Lady in a lemon gown. It looked magnificent. It is exactly the kind of image that I suspect works for both sides, both the UK and the US.
Yeah, Phil Mackey there inside Blenheim Palace. Thank you very much. Christian is going to do some television magic and disappear from one studio into another. We will let him get on and do that. Christian, I will be with you again tomorrow. We'll have a special edition of Beyond 100 Days. You'll be in Windsor. I'll be still here in Washington,
Yes.
and we'll be covering, of course, that side of the state visit as well. The working visit.
Yes, I've got another invite tomorrow, Catty, to the Palace, and I'm hoping to get nearer to the Palace than I currently am to this one. So we'll see.
Yeah, if you could just avoid the roundabout scenario, that would be great.
I'll see what I can do.
Okay, I'll see you back here tomorrow. Ron Christie, sitting watching all of this in London for us. I imagine, Ron, that the president you served, George W. Bush, would have been very happy with a welcome like that, as would any American president.
As would any American president, and certainly President Bush enjoyed his time with the Queen at Buckingham Palace, Caddy, but this was spectacular. I mean, the visuals on this did so much to put a shot in the arm, in my view, of both Theresa May and Donald Trump. They've had a long couple of weeks, both of them, both here on the continent as well as back in the United States, and Donald Trump got what he wanted. He wanted the visual. He loved the Bastille Day celebration that Christian spoke about a few moments ago of that parade. He's going to have another huge parade in Washington, D.C. later this year with our military. But the one thing that struck me, Caddy, from this is playing taps. Again, you talk about the special relationship between the United States and the United Kingdom. Hearing taps, a medley that's played when soldiers are put to rest, really to me put to rest the notion that there is a big rift between the United States and the United Kingdom. We fought together, we died together, we stick together.
And Ron, that special relationship then, in your mind, surpasses the current difficulties that there might be between members of the British population, and we've seen the polling numbers, and this particular president. Absolutely.
The polling numbers are about equal in the United States as they are in the United Kingdom. Donald Trump is somewhere at around 44 to 45% approval rating. Most people disapprove of the president here in the United Kingdom as well as back in the United States. Images like these, Caddy, help Donald Trump. They help shore him up by looking and acting presidential and receiving the deference and respect that is accorded to that office. So if I'm sitting in 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue tonight back in Washington, D.C. in the White House, I'm thinking home run.
Home run. What does he need to do in terms of substance during the course of this dinner this evening and the meetings that he's going to have over the course of the next 24 hours?
I think he has to calm a number of nerves, starting with the Prime Minister, starting with American business leaders who recognize that post-Brexit, they might lose a significant market share, and to reinforce with them the United States' obligation to stick with the UK and to work with the UK to strengthen our trade ties and our economic ties beyond our military ties and our historical association.
And then, of course, he meets the Queen, another chance. And this really is, there's so much pageantry in this visit, as well as the substance. And it's actually just as an important part in many ways of this visit of Donald Trump is this pageantry, because it's something that he is particularly keen on having. It's something that the British can offer him as they try to get this trade relationship from him. It's something that they can give to Donald Trump. And then he goes to Scotland to his golf resort. And then, of course, the bit of the visit that he has said might be the easiest of all, meeting Vladimir Putin. Ron, what do you make of the sequencing of all of this?
I think it's going to be a remarkable 48 hours and beyond. Going to meet the head of state tomorrow is very, very important for Donald Trump. It would be viewed not only here and back in the United States, but around the world as a slight if he didn't. And so meeting with the Queen at Windsor Castle in a royal castle gives the president the prestige he was looking for there. And then, of course, heading to Finland, heading to Helsinki for a very critical meeting with President Putin of Russia. There's been so much criticism in the United States about Donald Trump being a lackey of Russia. And given the complexities, the issues they have to discuss, and starting with just one of a pipeline through the Baltic Sea that could really disrupt the Ukraine, millions and millions of dollars at stake, of how does Russia project power on the European continent. And so the president needs to find a way to project strength, to reassure our NATO allies, to reassure our country friends that he's going to stand firm with Russia. And this opportunity in Helsinki kind of gives him the opportunity to do so. The question is, which Donald Trump will show up? Will it be the one who's very prepared and very steady, or will it be the one who's erratic and playing with more off the cuff?
And there you have it. There's Marine One sitting on the lawn at Blenheim Palace, waiting, I guess, for the... Or is that, no, it's just, I think we've gone back in time. That's perhaps the Marine One lifting off from Winfield House about an hour ago, taking off to Blenheim Palace. They've gone inside now. They are having their dinner, 150 odd people, most of them British business leaders, members of the American cabinet as well, of course, and the president, and the prime minister as well, inside Blenheim Palace. He's then expected in about an hour and a half to go back to Winfield House to the American ambassador's residence in London. He'll spend the night there, and that will be before his trip to Windsor, of course, tomorrow from Beyond 100 Days. That brings this to a close. Of course, we'll have a special edition back here tomorrow. Christian is still in Blenheim Palace, outside Blenheim Palace in Fraser's Field for us, and Christian picks up our coverage now. Christian, thank you.